My daughter Amy told me not to come for Christmas in her house, said her in-laws needed family time, but something in her voice felt wrong. So at 3:17 a.m. on December 24th, I used the spare key she didn't know I still had. I found her chained to her own kitchen chair, bruises on her arms, tears dried on her cheeks. And upstairs, her in-laws were having a champagne party, celebrating something big. What they didn't know was that this grease monkey they'd been mocking for 18 months owned the buildings their entire operation was running out of. And I'd been working with the FBI for longer than they'd been married. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. This is the story of how underestimating someone can cost you everything. I'm Eugene Abraham, and I discovered that Christmas Eve would destroy a $45 million criminal empire. Let me back up to June of last year. That's when Amy married Maxwell Sterling. I was proud that day. My daughter, a Harvard MBA, is marrying into one of Atlanta's oldest families. The Sterlings owned Sterling Imports, had memberships at Piedmont Driving Club, drove cars that cost more than most people's houses, and they made it very clear I didn't belong. The first sign was the wedding seating chart. They put me at table 12. In the back, next to the catering staff. Maxwell's college roommate got table 2. "Dad, it's just logistics," Amy said when I asked, but her eyes wouldn't meet mine. The real education started at their first dinner party in September. I showed up in my best clothes, pressed khakis, clean button-down, polished shoes. Victoria Sterling, Maxwell's mother, looked me up and down like I was tracking mud on her marble floors. "Eugene, right? The mechanic?" She said it like the word tasted bad. "I own 7 auto repair shops," I said. "Honest Abe's Auto Repair." She smiled that cold smile rich people perfect. How quaint. "Maxwell, didn't you say your father's company needed a new fleet mechanic?" The room went quiet. 30 people in designer clothes, holding wine that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage, all staring at me. Maxwell's father, Harrison Sterling, laughed. "Victoria, behave. Eugene does important work. Blue collar is the backbone of America." But his tone made it clear what he really thought. Over the next 6 months, it got worse. They'd invite me to events, then seat me with the help. They'd ask about my little garage business in front of their friends. When I mentioned expanding to an 8th location, Victoria actually patted my shoulder. "That's so ambitious," she said. "Most people in your situation know their limitations." The worst was the country club application. Amy had suggested it. Maybe I could join Piedmont, play golf with Maxwell sometimes, build a relationship. The rejection letter came 3 weeks later. "While Mr. Abraham seems like a decent gentleman, his professional background doesn't align with our membership standards." Maxwell showed it to me personally. "Sorry, Eugene. These old institutions can be particular." But he was smiling when he said it. I started noticing things after that. How Amy would change the subject when I called during their dinner parties. How she'd suggest we meet for coffee instead of me coming to the house. How she'd apologize for her in-laws' behavior, but never defend me. "Dad, you don't understand their world," she said one day in October. We were at a diner near my shop, neutral territory. They've been wealthy for generations. They don't know how to relate to working people. "I'm not working people, Amy. I'm your father." She reached across the table, took my grease-stained hand in her manicured one. "I know that, and I love you for it. But Maxwell's family, this is important to him, to us." That's when I realized what was happening. My daughter was ashamed of me. The woman I'd worked 16-hour days to put through Harvard. The woman I'd never remarried for, never took a vacation for, never bought myself anything nice for. She was choosing them over me. And the Sterlings knew it. Victoria started calling me Handyman instead of my name. Harrison would ask me to look under the hood of his Bentley when I visited. "Since you're here anyway." Maxwell would joke about getting me a uniform with my name on it. And Amy would just let it happen. By Thanksgiving, they weren't even pretending to respect me. And by Christmas, my daughter was telling me not to come at all. But what they didn't know was that I'd been building something while they were busy tearing me down. The call that changed everything came on December 15th. Mr. Abraham, this is Detective Maria Santos, Atlanta PD Financial Crimes. We need to talk. I was under the hood of a 2018 Camaro, but something in her voice made me drop my wrench. What about? Sterling Imports LLC. Your daughter's listed as their corporate secretary. My blood went cold. Amy had mentioned signing some paperwork for Maxwell's family business, but secretary? That meant legal liability. Full legal liability. I'll be right there. The police station downtown looked like every cop show you've ever seen. Gray walls, fluorescent lights, coffee that could strip paint. Detective Santos was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense handshake. Sir, we've been investigating Sterling Imports for 18 months. Money laundering, timber trafficking, possible human trafficking connections. It's a $45 million operation. She spread photos across her desk, shipping containers at the port of Savannah, forged customs documents, bank transfers to accounts in Myanmar and Cambodia. Your daughter signed incorporation papers in March, made herself personally liable for any criminal activity. I stared at the documents. Amy's signature, but something was off. The loops in the A's were too round. The line under Abraham was too straight. This isn't her signature, I said. Santos leaned forward. What? I know my daughter's handwriting. She's been signing Christmas cards for me since she was 12. This is close, but it's not hers. Santos pulled out a magnifying glass, studied the signature. You're right, but proving forgery in court? She shook her head. Mr. Abraham, your daughter is in serious legal trouble. If we can't prove coercion or forgery, she's looking at 20 years federal prison. 20 years. Amy would be 50 when she got out. What do you need from me? Information, access, evidence of coercion. Santos handed me a business card. We think your daughter discovered something about their operation. Maybe tried to blow the whistle. They've been isolating her, cutting off her support systems. You mean me? I mean you. Santos studied my face. Mr. Abraham, these people are dangerous. They've murdered witnesses before. If your daughter knows too much. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. I drove back to my shop in a daze. $45 million, international trafficking, murder, and my daughter trapped in the middle of it, carrying legal responsibility for crimes she never knew about. That night, I called Amy, got voicemail. I called Maxwell, same thing. I called the house phone. Victoria Sterling answered. Eugene, how unexpected. I need to speak to Amy. She's resting. The holidays are so stressful for her. Victoria, I need to talk to my daughter. Eugene, dear, perhaps it's better if you give her space. This has been such a difficult transition joining our family. She needs time to adjust to her new responsibilities. The way she said responsibilities made my skin crawl. What responsibilities? Oh, just family business matters. Nothing that would interest someone in your field. I hung up and drove to their house. Sat in my truck across the street for 2 hours. No lights in Amy's bedroom window, no movement at all. But 3 black SUVs came and went, men in suits carrying briefcases, and at 10 p.m. I saw Maxwell loading boxes into a van, heavy boxes that required 2 people to lift. I thought about Detective Santos's photos, shipping containers, forged documents, $45 million. The next morning, I went back to the police station. Detective Santos, I want to help. She looked up from her paperwork. Mr. Abraham, this is federal-level crime. It's dangerous. These people have killed. My daughter's in there, alone, carrying legal responsibility for their crimes. I leaned across her desk. You said you needed information, access, evidence. I can get all 3. How? That's when I told her about AL Property Management, about the 47 commercial buildings I owned throughout Atlanta, about the $800,000 in monthly rental income that nobody knew about, including the warehouse Sterling Imports operated out of, and the office building where they kept their financial records, and the storage facility where they met with their overseas contacts. Santos stared at me for a long moment. Mr. Abraham, are you saying you own the buildings their entire operation runs out of? I'm saying they've been paying rent to Abraham Lincoln Property Management for 3 years. They just never bothered to ask who AL stood for. For the first time since this nightmare began, Detective Santos smiled. Mr. Abraham, I think we're going to get along just fine. December 22nd, 2 days before Christmas, I decided to make one last attempt at a normal family relationship. Show up for their holiday party, bring gifts, try to connect with my daughter before the FBI operation began. Maybe there was still a chance to resolve this without destroying her marriage. The Sterling mansion sat on 3 acres in Buckhead's most exclusive neighborhood. 8,400 square feet of old Atlanta money, with columns that belonged in a history book and a circular driveway that could park 20 cars. Tonight, it was hosting 50 of Atlanta's wealthiest families. I wore my best suit, the one I'd bought for Amy's Harvard graduation. Pressed, clean, respectable. I even got my boots shined. The valet looked confused when I handed him my truck keys. A 2019 Ford F-250 with Honest Abe's Auto Repair logos on both doors. 187,000 miles and counting. Sir, are you with the catering company? I'm with the family. Maxwell met me at the front door, wearing a tuxedo that probably cost more than my truck. His smile was sharp enough to cut glass. Eugene, what a surprise. Amy invited me. Did she? How thoughtful. He looked past me at my truck, still idling in the circular drive. You know, the service entrance might have been more convenient. I'm not the help, Maxwell. Of course not. His smile never wavered. Come in. Everyone's dying to meet Amy's father. The living room was something out of a magazine. Crystal chandeliers, Persian rugs, furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. 30 people in designer clothes, holding champagne that probably cost more per bottle than I made in a day. And every single one of them turned to stare when I walked in. Victoria Sterling glided over like she owned the room, which technically she did. Eugene, how persistent of you to come. It's Christmas, Victoria. Yes, well... She gestured vaguely at the crowd. As you can see, we're entertaining some very important people tonight. The Whitman family from the bank, the Hendersons from the law firm, people whose names you might recognize from the social pages. Translation. People whose names I should recognize because people like me weren't supposed to be here. Where's Amy? Resting. She's been under such pressure lately. All these new responsibilities with the company. What responsibilities? Victoria's smile turned predatory. Nothing that would interest someone in your line of work. Harrison Sterling appeared at my elbow, holding a scotch that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. Eugene, good to see you, son. How's the garage business? Fine, Harrison. Wonderful, wonderful. You know, we were just discussing expanding our vehicle fleet. Maybe you could give us a quote on maintenance. Friend of the family discount, of course. The conversation around us had stopped. 30 people pretending not to listen while waiting for me to know my place. I don't do fleet work anymore, Harrison. No? What do you do then? That was my opening. I could have told them about AL Property Management, about the 47 buildings, about the 800,000 in monthly rental income. Instead, I said, I need to see my daughter. Maxwell stepped closer. His tuxedo was perfect. His hair was perfect. His smile was perfect. Everything about him screamed money and breeding and superiority. Eugene, Amy specifically asked for some space tonight. She's been struggling with some family transitions. What kind of transitions? Well, taking on more responsibility with Sterling Imports, learning to navigate our social circles, adjusting to expectations that might be unfamiliar to someone from her background. The way he said her background made it clear exactly what he meant. Her background is Harvard Business School and a father who worked his ass off to get her there. The room went dead quiet. Victoria's champagne glass froze halfway to her lips. Maxwell's smile never flickered. Of course, we all respect your contributions to Amy's education, but surely you understand that she's part of a different world now. Our world, with our standards. Your standards? Expectations of behavior, social norms, ways of conducting business that might not be familiar to someone who works with their hands. Harrison laughed. The kind of laugh rich people use to diffuse tension while making it worse. Maxwell, don't be such a snob. Eugene's salt of the earth. Good, honest work. He clapped me on the shoulder like I was a friendly dog. Nothing wrong with knowing your place in the world. And there it was. The truth underneath all the politeness. Know your place. Where's my daughter, Maxwell? Eugene, I think maybe you should go. I'm not leaving without seeing Amy. Maxwell's perfect facade cracked just slightly. Actually, you are. He gestured, and two men in suits appeared from nowhere. Not guests. Security. Eugene, these gentlemen will walk you out. Please don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. The entire room was watching now. 30 of Atlanta's most powerful people, waiting to see if the grease monkey would know when he was beaten. I looked around the room, at the crystal and the paintings and the faces full of contempt and amusement. Then I looked at Maxwell. Your daughter signed her life away, mechanic. She's ours now. He said it quietly so only I could hear, but his eyes were cold and certain. That's when I realized this wasn't about social class or family dynamics. This was about control, and my daughter was trapped. Gentlemen, I said to the security guards, I'll see myself out. I walked to the door, every eye in the room following me, but as I left, I pulled out my phone and pressed record, because Detective Santos had taught me that everything these people said was evidence, and I was about to collect a lot more. I sat in my truck outside the Sterling mansion for 20 minutes, watching the party through the windows. Expensive cars kept arriving. Bentleys, Ferraris, a Rolls-Royce that probably cost more than my entire business. But what caught my attention were the 3 black SUVs parked in the service area behind the house. The same SUVs I'd seen the night before. I pulled out my phone and called Detective Santos. Mr. Abraham, it's almost midnight. They wouldn't let me see Amy. Maxwell threatened me. Threatened how? I played her the recording. Maxwell's voice, cold and certain. Your daughter signed her life away, mechanic. She's ours now. Santos was quiet for a long moment. Mr. Abraham, that sounds like evidence of kidnapping. What do? We stick to the plan, but first I need you to do something for me. What? Tomorrow morning I want you to visit your properties, the ones Sterling Imports operates out of. Take photos. Document everything. Can you do that without arousing suspicion? I almost laughed. Detective, I've been collecting rent from these properties for 3 years. Nobody thinks twice when the landlord shows up. Good. And Mr. Abraham, be careful. If they're holding your daughter... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. The next morning, I started my rounds at 7 a.m. First stop, the warehouse district near the port of Savannah. Sterling Imports rented a 85,000 square foot facility from AL Property Management. Had been for 2 years. I parked my truck next to the loading dock and walked around like I owned the place, which I did. The facility was busier than usual. Forklifts moving shipping containers, workers in coveralls loading trucks, men in expensive suits pointing at paperwork. I pulled out my phone and started taking pictures. License plates, shipping container numbers, faces. Can I help you? One of the suited men had approached. Young, aggressive, the kind of guy who thought expensive clothes made him important. Property inspection, I said, showing him my AL Property Management clipboard. Routine maintenance check. Oh. His attitude shifted immediately. Sorry, sir. We weren't expecting anyone. That's the point of surprise inspections. I walked through the warehouse like I belonged there, taking notes on my clipboard, photos with my phone. The operation was bigger than Detective Santos had described. Hundreds of shipping containers, dozens of workers, computers, and communication equipment that looked military grade. And in the back office, through a window, I saw financial documents spread across a conference table. Bank routing numbers, wire transfer receipts, accounts in countries I'd never heard of. $45 million, Detective Santos had said. Looking at this operation, I believed it. Second stop, the office building downtown. Sterling Imports rented the entire 14th floor. Premium location, premium rent. Premium view of the FBI field office 6 blocks away. I rode the elevator up like any other landlord checking on a property. The receptionist barely looked at me when I flashed my maintenance credentials. "Here to check the HVAC system," I said. "14th floor, right?" "Right." The Sterling Imports offices were a front operation masterpiece. Expensive furniture, professional staff, everything designed to look legitimate. But I noticed things a casual visitor might miss. The computers were all connected to external hard drives. Every desk had a paper shredder. The conference room windows were covered with security film, and every employee looked nervous. I spent 40 minutes walking through the space, taking photos, making notes. The staff treated me like I was invisible, just another working guy doing his job, which was exactly what I wanted. My phone buzzed with a text from Detective Santos. "Any problems?" I typed back, "All quiet. Evidence everywhere." But as I headed for the elevator, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. A security monitor in the main office showing live camera feeds. One of the feeds was labeled Sterling Residence, basement level, and I could see my daughter tied to a chair, alone in what looked like a concrete room. They weren't just controlling Amy, they were holding her prisoner. Christmas Eve morning, my phone rang at 6 a.m. "Eugene, it's Victoria Sterling." I sat up in bed, instantly awake. Victoria had never called me directly. "What do you want, Victoria?" "I'm calling to extend a Christmas Eve invitation. Maxwell suggested we include you in our holiday celebration after all." "After throwing me out 2 nights ago?" "Why?" "Well, it is Christmas, and Amy has been asking about you." Amy? If they were using her as bait, she was either cooperating or couldn't refuse. "What time?" 7 p.m. And Eugene? "Do try to dress appropriately. We're entertaining some very important people." The line went dead. I called Detective Santos immediately. "It's a trap," she said without hesitation. "I know, but if Amy's there..." "Mr. Abraham, we're not ready. The federal warrant isn't signed yet. If you go in there alone, I won't be alone." "What do you mean?" "I mean I'm tired of playing defense." At 6:30 p.m., I put on my best suit and drove to Buckhead. But first, I made 3 phone calls. The Sterling mansion was lit up like a Christmas card. Valet parking, string quartet on the front lawn, enough luxury cars to stock a dealership. I handed my truck keys to the same valet from 2 nights ago. This time, he didn't ask if I was with the catering company. Maxwell met me at the store, wearing a different tuxedo, but the same predatory smile. "Eugene, so glad you could make it." "Where's Amy?" "She'll be down shortly. First, come meet some friends." He led me into the main living room, where 60 of Atlanta's most powerful people were drinking champagne and eating caviar that probably cost more per ounce than gold. Victoria Sterling spotted me immediately and glided over with the grace of a shark. "Eugene, how..." "Punctual." She looked me up and down like she was appraising livestock. "That's certainly an interesting suit." "It's clean." "Of course it is." She turned to the room, raising her voice just enough. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet Eugene Abraham, Amy's father." The conversations died. 60 faces turned to stare. "Eugene owns several automotive repair establishments," Victoria continued. "He's what you might call a self-made man." The way she said it made self-made sound like a disease. Harrison Sterling appeared with his usual Scotch and condescending smile. "Eugene, good to see you again. How's the garage business? Still getting your hands dirty?" 60 people waited for my answer. "Business is fine, Harrison." "Wonderful. You know, it's so important to have honest tradespeople we can rely on." He gestured to the room. "Most of us wouldn't know a carburetor from a transmission, would we?" Polite laughter, the kind rich people use to show they're better than whatever they're laughing at. "Speaking of which," Victoria said, "Eugene, we were just discussing the importance of knowing one's place in society, staying within one's natural boundaries." More stares, more waiting. Maxwell stepped closer, his voice carrying across the room. "It's really quite admirable, actually. Eugene never pretended to be something he wasn't. Never tried to climb above his station." He paused for effect. "It's so refreshing to meet someone who accepts their limitations." "Limitations?" I asked. "Well, social expectations, educational background, the kinds of environments where different people are comfortable." Victoria nodded approvingly. "Exactly. There's no shame in honest labor, But there's wisdom in recognizing where one belongs. The room was dead silent now. 60 of Atlanta's elite, watching the grease monkey get put in his place. Harrison raised his glass. To honest work and honest people who know their place in the world. To honest work, the room echoed. They were toasting me like I was a well-trained dog. That's when a woman in diamonds stepped forward. Elizabeth Whitman, from Whitman Private Banking. Eugene, isn't it fascinating how Atlanta's old families have built such lasting legacies? The Sterlings, for instance, have been prominent for generations. Fascinating, I said. It takes such vision to build something that lasts. Something substantial. She gestured around the mansion. Real estate. Established businesses, generational wealth. Maxwell nodded. Mother, didn't you say Eugene rents his shop space? Doesn't actually own property? Victoria's smile was sharp enough to cut diamond. I believe so, yes, which is perfectly practical for someone in his position. Property ownership requires such substantial capital, Elizabeth continued, the kind of investment most working people simply can't manage. Substantial capital, I repeated. Oh yes, commercial real estate especially. Millions and millions of dollars, far beyond most people's reach. Harrison laughed. Eugene, you'd probably need to own 20 or 30 buildings just to afford this neighborhood's property taxes. More laughter, more stares. That's when I saw her. Amy appeared at the top of the main staircase, wearing a black dress that made her look like she was going to a funeral. Her face was pale, her hands shaking slightly as she gripped the banister, but her eyes met mine across the room, and I saw something there that made my heart break. Relief. Like she'd been drowning and finally saw a rescue boat. Amy, Victoria called out, come tell everyone what your father does for a living. My daughter walked down those stairs like she was walking to an execution. Every step was careful, controlled, like she was afraid of falling, or afraid of what would happen if she said the wrong thing. Dad, she said when she reached the bottom. Her voice was barely a whisper. Hey, sweetheart. Maxwell put his arm around her shoulders, and I saw her flinch. Amy was just telling us how proud she is of her father's work, he said. Weren't you, darling? Amy looked around the room at 60 expectant faces. Then she looked at me. My father, she said slowly, is the hardest working man I've ever known. Victoria clapped her hands together. How sweet. Eugene, you must be so proud that Amy appreciates your contributions. I am proud, I said. Of course, although I imagine it must be difficult sometimes, watching your daughter move in circles so far above your own experience. 60 faces, waiting for me to crumble. Instead, I pulled out my phone. Actually, Victoria, speaking of contributions, I scrolled through my contacts and found the number I wanted. I need to make a quick business call. I hope nobody minds. The room went quiet again, but this time it felt different. Hello, Detective Santos. It's Eugene Abraham. Yes, I'm at the Sterling residence now. Victoria's face went white. About those property inspections we discussed, I think it's time. I looked around the room at 60 confused, increasingly nervous faces. Oh, and Detective? You might want to bring some federal agents with you. The silence in that room was absolute. 60 of Atlanta's most powerful people staring at me like I'd just grown a second head. Victoria Sterling was the first to speak. Eugene, what kind of property inspections? I put my phone away and looked around the room. At the crystal chandeliers, the Persian rugs, the faces full of confusion and growing concern. Victoria, we need to talk about your rent. Our rent? Sterling Imports, LLC, 85,000 square feet at 1247 Port Industrial Drive. Your lease is 3 months behind. The color drained from Harrison Sterling's face. I don't understand, he said. Simple business, Harrison. You rent warehouse space from AL Property Management. $300,000 a month. Haven't paid since September. Maxwell stepped forward, his perfect composure finally cracking. How do you know about our lease agreements? Because I'm your landlord. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a manila folder, set it on the coffee table between the champagne and caviar. Property deeds, bank statements, rental agreements, every building Sterling Imports operates out of. I looked directly at Victoria. You've been paying rent to Abraham Lincoln Property Management for 3 years. The room erupted in whispers. 60 confused voices asking questions nobody wanted to answer. Elizabeth Whitman from the bank stepped closer, studying the documents. Abraham Lincoln, AL Property Management? That's right. But that's... She looked up at me, understanding dawning in her eyes. That's one of Atlanta's largest commercial real estate portfolios. 47 buildings. Downtown, Midtown, Warehouse District. I pulled out another document. Current market value, $12.3 million. Victoria's champagne glass hit the marble floor and shattered. Monthly rental income, I continued, $837,000. The whispers stopped. The room went dead silent again. Harrison Sterling's scotch was shaking in his hand. That's impossible. Is it? I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, turned the screen toward the room. Last month's deposits. Want to see the routing numbers? Maxwell grabbed the property deeds from the coffee table, scanning through them with desperate eyes. This can't be right. You're a mechanic. I'm a businessman who owns auto repair shops and commercial real estate, and apparently every building your family's operation runs out of. I looked around the room at faces that were no longer confused. Now they were calculating, understanding, realizing what this meant. Victoria, about that warehouse lease. 3 months behind is normally grounds for eviction. You can't. We have contracts, which specify payment terms you violated. I pulled out another document. Eviction notice, filed yesterday with Fulton County Superior Court. Elizabeth Whitman was studying the property deeds with a banker's eye for detail. These are legitimate, she said quietly. The holdings, the valuations. Mr. Abraham, you own half the commercial district. But not half, about 30%. Harrison Sterling sank into his chair like his legs couldn't hold him anymore. The office building downtown, he whispered. 14 floors. You own that too? Sterling Imports rents the entire 14th floor, $90,000 a month, also 3 months behind. Maxwell was reading through the eviction notices now, his perfect facade completely gone. This is some kind of mistake, some kind of fraud. You can't just own all this. Want to see the tax records, the insurance policies, the management company payroll? I was enjoying this now. 18 months of humiliation, 18 months of being treated like dirt, and now they were finding out that the grease monkey owned the buildings their entire world operated out of. But then I saw Amy. She was standing next to the staircase, watching everything with a mixture of shock and something that looked like hope. For the first time in months, she looked like my daughter again, instead of a frightened stranger. That's when my phone rang. Mr. Abraham? Detective Santos, we're 5 minutes out. Good. The party's just getting started. I hung up and looked at Victoria Sterling. Detective Santos, Atlanta PD Financial Crimes Division. She's been investigating Sterling Imports for 18 months. Victoria's face went from white to green. Investigating what? Money laundering, timber trafficking, human trafficking, $45 million in illegal transactions. I looked directly at Maxwell, all running through properties I own. The room exploded, 60 voices shouting questions, making excuses, demanding explanations. Elizabeth Whitman was backing toward the door. Other guests were checking their phones, probably calling lawyers, but Harrison Sterling just sat there, staring at the eviction notices like they were his death sentence. Eugene, he said quietly. Eugene, there must be some way to work this out. You want to work it out? We're family. Practically family. Surely we can come to some arrangement. I walked over to his chair, looked down at this man who'd spent 18 months treating me like hired help. Harrison, 3 hours ago you toasted me for knowing my place. Eugene, I didn't mean... You said I should stay within my natural boundaries. My natural boundaries include collecting rent from tenants who think they're better than their landlord. Maxwell was on his phone now, probably calling his lawyer. Victoria was frantically shuffling through the property documents like she could find some mistake, some loophole. But Amy was walking toward me. Dad? Her voice was small, uncertain. Is this real? You really own all this? It's real, sweetheart. But why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you say anything when they were... And she looked around the room at her husband's family, at their guests, at the wreckage of their superiority complex. When they were treating you like that? Because I wanted you to choose me for who I am, not what I own. Her eyes filled with tears. Dad, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I let them. Amy, we'll talk later. Right now, we need to discuss why you've been signing documents for Sterling Imports. Maxwell spun around from his phone call. She doesn't know anything about the business? She's listed as corporate secretary. That makes her legally liable for every crime you've committed. What crimes? Victoria demanded. We run a legitimate import business. Do you? Because the FBI seems to think otherwise. That's when we heard the sirens. Blue and red lights flashing through the mansion windows, car doors slamming, voices shouting orders. The doorbell rang. Maxwell started for the back door, but I stepped in front of him. Going somewhere? This is harassment. This is some kind of setup. This is justice. The front door opened and Detective Santos walked in with 6 federal agents behind her. Eugene Abraham? Right here, Detective. Mr. Abraham, thank you for your cooperation. She looked around the room at 60 terrified faces. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Detective Santos, Atlanta PD. We have federal warrants for the search and seizure of all Sterling Imports properties and assets. Victoria Sterling's legs gave out. She collapsed onto her antique sofa like the weight of the world had just landed on her shoulders. This is impossible, she whispered. This is all impossible. Detective Santos walked over to Maxwell Sterling with handcuffs in her hand. Maxwell Sterling, you're under arrest for money laundering, trafficking in stolen goods, and conspiracy to commit fraud. As the cuffs clicked shut, Maxwell looked at me with pure hatred. You think you've won something, mechanic? I think I've saved my daughter. And for the first time in 18 months, Amy smiled. The next hour moved like a perfectly choreographed operation. Detective Santos and her team had been planning this for months. Federal agents secured the building while forensic accountants set up laptops in the Sterling's dining room. Every document, every computer, every piece of evidence carefully cataloged and seized. I watched from the living room as they dismantled the Sterling empire piece by piece. Mr. Abraham? Agent Robert Chen from the FBI approached me with a tablet computer. We need to document the property relationships, your buildings, their operations. Whatever you need. Chen showed me surveillance photos from the warehouse. This facility processes about 2 million in illegal timber per month, rare hardwoods from protected forests smuggled through the port of Savannah. How long has this been going on? 3 years, maybe longer. He swiped to another photo. The downtown office coordinates wire transfers to shell companies in Myanmar, Cambodia, Vietnam. The money gets laundered through fake timber purchases, then transferred back to U.S. accounts. $45 million. That's just what we can track. The real number might be twice that. I looked across the room at Victoria Sterling, sitting on her antique sofa while federal agents searched her house. She looked smaller now, older, like someone had deflated her. Agent Chen, what about my daughter? Her legal exposure? That's why we needed your cooperation, your daughter's signature on those incorporation papers. He pulled up a document on his tablet. We had handwriting experts analyze them. Definite forgery. Relief flooded through me. So she's clear? More than clear. She's a victim. And now she's a protected witness. Across the room, Amy was talking to a female FBI agent, giving her statement. She looked tired but no longer terrified. For the first time in months, she looked like herself. Maxwell Sterling sat in handcuffs on a chair near the fireplace, watching his world collapse. Victoria and Harrison were being read their rights by 2 different agents. Eugene Abraham? I turned to find Detective Santos, approaching with a thick folder. The property seizures are complete. Sterling Imports is officially out of business as of tonight. What happens to my buildings? They're evidence now, but they're still your buildings. Once the investigation is complete, you'll have full control again. She smiled, although you might want to find new tenants. I think I can manage that. Santos opened her folder, showing me surveillance photos I hadn't seen before. Mr. Abraham, your cooperation broke this case open. We've been investigating the Sterling network for 18 months, but we could never get inside their operation. Your access to their buildings, your ability to document their activities." She shook her head. "You handed us everything we needed." "I just wanted my daughter safe." "You did more than that. This trafficking network extends to 6 countries. Millions of dollars in stolen timber, hundreds of exploited workers, money that funds everything from drug cartels to human trafficking." She closed the folder. "You helped shut down a major criminal enterprise." Agent Chen approached with an update. "The warehouse team found the jackpot. Financial records, shipping manifests, employee files, everything dating back 4 years." "How bad is it?" "Bad enough. The Sterlings are looking at 20 to 30 years federal prison. Minimum." I looked at Victoria Sterling, remembering 18 months of condescension and humiliation. Remembering her calling me handyman, remembering her toast to people who know their place. But I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt something else. Pity. "Dad?" Amy appeared at my elbow, free from her FBI interview. She looked exhausted but relieved. "How are you doing, sweetheart?" "Better. Much better." She looked around the room at the federal agents, the evidence boxes, the handcuffed members of her husband's family. "Dad, I need to ask you something." "What?" "Why didn't you tell me? About the real estate business, the money, any of it." I thought about that for a moment. About 18 months of watching my daughter choose them over me. About the country club rejections and the dinner party humiliations, and the gradual realization that she was ashamed of who I was. "Because I needed you to love me for being your father, not for being rich." Her eyes filled with tears. "Dad, I never stopped loving you. I got lost for a while. They made me think I had to choose between you and the life I wanted, between being your daughter and being respectable." "You never had to choose." "I know that now." She looked over at Maxwell, sitting in handcuffs, staring at the floor. "I know a lot of things now." Agent Chen approached us with paperwork. "Ms. Abraham Sterling, we'll need you to testify at the federal trial. Are you prepared for that?" "Absolutely." "The defense will try to claim you were complicit, that you knew about the criminal activity." Amy straightened her shoulders. "Agent Chen, I have a Harvard MBA and 18 months of forged documents to explain. I think I can handle their lawyers." I smiled. That was my daughter talking. Strong, smart, unafraid. Detective Santos joined us with a final update. The Port Authority team found shipping containers full of illegal timber, ready for export. Street value about $12 million. All of it through my warehouse? All of it. Mr. Abraham, without your buildings, this operation couldn't have functioned. They needed legitimate commercial space to look respectable. And now they don't have it anymore. Now they don't have anything anymore. And the last of the Sterling family was led out in handcuffs at 11:43 p.m. on Christmas Eve. Victoria Sterling paused at the front door, turned back to look at me one final time. "Eugene," she said quietly, "we underestimated you." "No," I said, "you underestimated honest work." And then she was gone. 6 weeks later, the full scope of the Sterling operation made national headlines. Atlanta trafficking ring laundered $67 million through fake timber business, read the front page of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. $67 million, not 45 like Detective Santos originally estimated. I was reading the article over coffee at my shop when my phone rang. "Mr. Abraham, this is Amanda Walsh from CNN. We'd like to interview you about the Sterling case." "Not interested." "Sir, you're the landlord who helped break up one of the largest trafficking operations in Georgia history. Our viewers would love to hear." "Not interested." I hung up. The phone rang again immediately. NBC this time, then Fox, then 3 different podcast producers. Fame wasn't what I wanted. Justice was what I wanted. And justice was working. Maxwell Sterling pled guilty to 17 federal charges and received 28 years in federal prison. Victoria and Harrison Sterling were sentenced to 25 years each. The entire network, 63 people across 6 states, had been arrested and charged. The financial impact was even more satisfying. Sterling imports his assets, buildings, equipment, bank accounts, luxury cars, were seized under federal forfeiture laws. The government auctioned everything and used the proceeds to compensate victims of trafficking. The Sterling mansion sold for $2.8 million. The Bentley went for $200,000. Even Victoria's jewelry collection brought in $400,000 at auction. But the best part was the social consequences. Piedmont Driving Club revoked the Sterling family's membership and issued a public statement distancing themselves from criminal enterprises. The society pages, which used to feature Victoria at charity galas, now ran corrections explaining her absence. Elizabeth Whitman from the bank lost her job when federal investigators discovered she'd processed suspicious wire transfers without proper reporting. The law firm that handled Sterling Imports' legal work was sanctioned by the Georgia State Bar. 60 people who'd watched me get humiliated at Christmas Eve dinner were now explaining to their friends how they'd always suspected something was wrong with the Sterling family. The warehouse district tenants were a different story. Word spread quickly that AL Property Management was owned by a guy who'd helped the FBI bust a major criminal operation. My property values actually increased because business owners wanted to rent from someone they could trust. I had a waiting list of legitimate companies wanting to lease Sterling Imports' old space. But the personal consequences were the most important. Amy filed for divorce the day after Maxwell's arrest. The legal process was complicated because of the criminal charges, but her Harvard Law School classmates helped navigate the federal requirements. She moved into a new apartment downtown. Nothing fancy, but clean and safe and hers. "Dad, I want to pay my own rent," she told me when I offered to help. "I want to know I can take care of myself." "You always could, sweetheart. You just forgot for a while." She'd started seeing a therapist to work through what she called her 18 months of bad judgment. The sessions were helping her understand how the Sterlings had gradually isolated her from everyone who actually cared about her. "They didn't just marry me," she explained over dinner one night. "They groomed me, made me financially dependent, socially isolated, emotionally manipulated. I lost myself completely. But you found yourself again." We found each other again. The legal proceedings continued through the spring. Federal prosecutors called me to testify about property ownership and rental agreements, simple business testimony that helped establish the scope of the criminal operation. But the most satisfying testimony came from Amy. She sat in federal court for 3 days, explaining how the Sterlings had forged her signature on incorporation documents, isolated her from family support, and used threats and manipulation to control her behavior. The defense lawyers tried to argue that she was a willing participant who turned against her husband only after his arrest. That lasted until Amy produced 18 months of documentation. Medical records showing stress-related health problems, phone records showing her calls to me had been blocked, financial records showing Maxwell had controlled every aspect of her spending. "Your Honor," she said during cross-examination, "I have a Harvard MBA. Do you really think I would voluntarily sign documents, making myself legally responsible for timber trafficking without reading them?" The jury deliberated for 6 hours, guilty on all counts. 3 months later, I got a call from Agent Chen. "Mr. Abraham, the investigation is officially closed. Your properties are released from evidence status." "Good. I've got new tenants lined up." "Legitimate tenants?" "The most legitimate I can find." I hung up and looked around my auto repair shop. Oil stains on the concrete, the smell of engine grease, tools worth more than some people's cars. Honest work, built with my own hands, worth $12 million in commercial real estate, and a daughter who was proud to be my family. The phone rang. Another reporter. This time I answered. "If you're watching this, I want you to know something important. I never set out to destroy the Sterling family. I set out to save my daughter. But sometimes, saving the people you love means refusing to accept unacceptable behavior. For 18 months, I let them treat me like I was less than human because I thought that would help Amy fit into their world. I thought love meant accepting humiliation. I was wrong. Real love means setting boundaries. Real love means standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult. Amy and I have Sunday dinner every week now. At my kitchen table, eating food I cooked, talking about her new job and my business and our plans for the future. She's working for a nonprofit legal aid clinic, helping other people escape abusive relationships. She says understanding what happened to her has given her a mission. I'm proud of the woman she's become. Again, the Sterling properties are all rented to legitimate businesses now. Small companies, family operations, people who work hard and pay their bills on time. People who know the difference between success and superiority. If you're dealing with family members who make you feel ashamed of who you are, remember this. You don't have to earn respect from people who refuse to give it. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable their worst behavior. Where are you watching from? Share your story of standing up to family bullies in the comments below.